We are glad to welcome you to the Lucas History Channel. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more stories like this. Enjoy your viewing. The tires screeched as I swung the car into the driveway of the Parkers' house. My heart pounded against my ribcage, each beat echoing with fury and disbelief. Just hours ago, my wife, Beth, had suggested I toss my house key into a bowl for strangers to fondle, literally and figuratively. 10 years of marriage, 3 children, and a life we had built together were suddenly reduced to a parlor game at some tasteless party. I killed the engine and glanced at her in the passenger seat. She was furious, arms crossed, glaring daggers at me. Her lips were pressed so tightly together they'd nearly disappeared. "You're insufferable," she hissed. "And you're unbelievable," I shot back. "You actually thought I'd be okay with you sleeping with someone else tonight?" Her eyes narrowed, her voice dropping to a low, venomous tone. "It's one night, Mark. One. I thought you'd understand. Don't you want to feel alive for a change?" I clenched the steering wheel, the leather groaning beneath my grip. "I'm plenty alive, Beth. What I don't want is my wife crawling into bed with some stranger while I sit around like an idiot. You made vows. Do you even remember them?" She smirked, her defiance infuriating. "I remember. But it's not like I'm asking for a divorce, Mark. This is just variety. A little adventure." "Adventure?" I barked out a harsh laugh. "If that's what you call it, then go ahead. Have your fun. But don't expect me to be waiting when you're done." Her smirk faltered. For the first time that night, I saw hesitation in her eyes. I swung the car door open, stepped out, and stalked toward the front door. A muffled hum of laughter and conversation spilled out when I pushed it open. People were mingling, sipping cocktails, their faces glowing with anticipation. I ignored their curious glances, headed straight to the kitchen where the infamous bowl sat on the counter. Brightly colored keychains jingled as the bowl rattled under my touch. My hand dove in, fingers seeking the familiar curve of the blue keychain Beth had insisted we buy together. I yanked it out and held it high, my voice steady but seething. "I'm taking this back. My wife isn't participating in this insanity." A hush fell over the room. Beth followed me in, her cheeks blazing crimson. "Mark," she snapped, grabbing my arm. "You're humiliating me." "And you've humiliated me," I shot back, pulling away. "You can either come with me now, or you can stay here and lose me forever. Your choice." The silence stretched, unbearable. The crowd looked at her, then at me, waiting for the drama to play out. Beth's jaw tightened, but eventually, she turned to the room and muttered an apology before storming toward the door. "Fine," she said. "You win. Let's go." But as we drove away, her words lingered, heavy and ominous. "You'll regret this, Mark. You'll see." And I couldn't help but wonder, had I already lost her? The tension in the car was suffocating, the silence broken only by the hum of the tires on the asphalt. Beth stared out the window, her reflection in the glass distorted and angry. I gripped the wheel tighter, my knuckles pale against the dark leather. My mind reeled, trying to make sense of what had just happened. "I still can't believe you would even consider something like that," I finally said, my voice low but cutting. Her head snapped toward me, her eyes blazing. "And I can't believe how controlling you are, Mark. It's one night. One stupid night. It's not like I don't love you anymore." "You've got a funny way of showing it," I said through clenched teeth. "If you loved me, Beth, you wouldn't need someone else to excite you." She scoffed. "This isn't about love. It's about feeling alive, feeling desired. God, Mark, when's the last time you looked at me like I was anything more than a grocery list in a bedtime routine?" I swerved to the side of the road and slammed the car into park. "You think I don't desire you? After everything we've built? After 3 kids in 10 years, you don't think I still look at you and think, that's my wife. That's the woman I'd go to war for. My voice cracked, the anger giving way to something more fragile. You're wrong, Beth. Dead wrong. For a moment, she didn't respond. The anger in her eyes flickered, replaced by something I couldn't quite place, guilt, maybe, or regret. But then it was gone, replaced by that same icy defiance. You wouldn't understand, she muttered, crossing her arms. I leaned back against the seat, the weight of her words settling on my chest. This wasn't just about the party. It was about something deeper, something that had been festering between us for years, unnoticed or ignored. We drove the rest of the way home in silence. The house was dark when we arrived, the kind of quiet that only comes when the kids are staying somewhere else. I turned the key in the lock and pushed the door open, stepping inside without waiting for Beth. She followed, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. "Mark," she said softly as I dropped my keys on the counter. I didn't turn around. "Don't," I said. "Not tonight." Her voice hardened. "So, what? You're just going to ignore me now? Pretend this never happened?" I turned to face her, my exhaustion evident in the slump of my shoulders. "I don't know what you want me to say, Beth. That I'm okay with this? That I'm not furious and hurt and disgusted? Because I can't." She threw her hands up in frustration. "Why does it always have to be about you? Did you ever stop to think about why I might want this? Why I might need it?" "You don't need it," I said, my voice rising. "You need to remember who we are, who we were before this madness." Her lips trembled, but she set her jaw stubbornly. "I'm going out," she said suddenly, grabbing her purse from the table. "Going out? Where?" "Back to the Parkers," she said, defiance flashing in her eyes. I stepped in front of the door, blocking her path. "You're not serious. Move, Mark." "No." We stood there, locked in a silent battle. Finally, she shoved past me, wrenching the door open and disappearing into the night. I sat in the living room for hours, staring at the clock and waiting for her to come back. Midnight came and went, and with it, the hope that she'd walk through the door and tell me she'd changed her mind. By the time the first rays of dawn broke through the curtains, I knew it was over. She wasn't coming back. At least, not the same Beth I thought I knew. The sun rose slowly, painting the room in pale shades of morning, but it did nothing to warm the chill that had settled deep in my chest. I was still on the couch, my arms draped over my knees, staring at the empty doorway. My mind churned, replaying the events of the night over and over. How had it come to this? Beth's betrayal wasn't just a lapse in judgment, it felt like a deliberate unraveling of everything we had built. The sound of the door opening startled me. I turned sharply, half expecting to see Beth slipping in quietly, remorse etched across her face. But when the door swung wide, it wasn't remorse that greeted me, it was arrogance. Beth walked in, her hair slightly disheveled, her dress wrinkled, and her lipstick smudged. She didn't bother meeting my eyes as she tossed her purse on the counter and went straight to the fridge. "You're back," I said, my voice hoarse from disuse. She grabbed a bottle of water, twisted the cap, and took a long sip before finally acknowledging me. "What? Did you think I'd just run away?" I stood, the knot in my stomach tightening. "I thought maybe you'd realize what you've done. That you'd come back ready to apologize." "Apologize?" She laughed bitterly. "For what? For doing what I needed to feel human again." My fists clenched at my sides. "You needed to sleep with someone else to feel human?" Her expression hardened, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "You wouldn't understand." "You're right," I snapped. "I don't understand. I don't understand how the woman I married, the mother of my children, could throw away everything we've built for, what? A few hours with some stranger. Her lips curled into a faint, mocking smile. It wasn't just about him, Mark. It was about me. About feeling wanted. Feeling alive. You think I didn't want you? My voice rose, my frustration spilling over. I've spent years proving how much I love you, how much I desire you. I've been faithful to you, Beth. I've stood by you through everything. And this is how you repay me. She stared at me, her confidence faltering. For a moment, I thought she might break, might crumble under the weight of what she'd done. But then she straightened, her chin lifting defiantly. You're being dramatic, she said. It was one night, Mark. One mistake. We can move past this. Move past this? I barked out a humorless laugh. Beth, I can't just forget what you've done. You chose him. You chose to betray me, betray our family. How do you expect me to move past that? Her eyes darkened, and her voice dropped to a cold, cutting tone. I didn't choose him, Mark. I chose me. For once, I put myself first. I stepped back, her words hitting me like a physical blow. You put yourself first, I repeated, my voice hollow. And now you've lost everything. The next few days passed in a blur. Beth stayed at the house, acting as if nothing had changed, but every interaction between us was strained and bitter. The children, still staying with my mother, were blissfully unaware of the chaos unraveling their home. I spent most of my time away from the house, driving aimlessly or sitting in coffee shops, trying to figure out what to do next. On one of those drives, I found myself pulling into the parking lot of a law office. The sign above the door read, Harrison and Associates, Family Law Specialists. I stared at the sign for a long time, my heart heavy with the weight of what it represented. Divorce. Custody. Lawyers. It all felt so final, so impossibly real. But Beth had made her choice. Now, I had to make mine. That night, I returned to the house with my mind made up. Beth was in the living room, scrolling through her phone, her feet curled up on the couch as if nothing had changed. We need to talk, I said, standing in the doorway. She looked up, her expression unreadable. About what? About us. About the kids. About what happens next. She sighed, setting her phone aside. Mark, I've already told you. It was one night. I don't see why you're making this into such a big deal. I stepped closer, my jaw tight. It wasn't just one night, Beth. It was a betrayal. And it's not something I can forgive. Her eyes widened slightly, but she quickly masked her surprise with indifference. So, what? You're leaving me? I've already spoken to a lawyer, I said, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. I'm filing for divorce. Beth's composure cracked, her eyes filling with a mix of anger and fear. You can't be serious, Mark. What about the kids? What about us? There is no us anymore, I said quietly. You made sure of that. As I turned to leave the room, her voice stopped me. You're making a mistake, she said, her tone venomous. You think you're hurting me, but you're just hurting yourself. You'll never find someone who loves you the way I do. I looked back at her, my expression cold. You're right, Beth. I'll never find someone who loves me the way you do. And I thank God for that. With that, I walked away, leaving her alone in the dimly lit room. The air in the house was heavy, each corner filled with memories that now felt tainted. I spent the night in the guest room, the same bed we'd used for visitors, now my refuge from the woman I no longer recognized. Every sound she made, her footsteps creaking on the floor, the clink of her glass in the kitchen, felt like a reminder of the fracture she'd caused. By morning, I had resolved to take control of the situation. I dressed quickly, grabbed my keys, and left the house before Beth could start another argument. My first stop was my mom's house. The kids greeted me with the enthusiasm only children can muster, their laughter and hugs momentarily lifting the weight from my shoulders. "Where's Mom?" Natalie, my oldest, asked as she pulled back from a hug. "She's taking care of something," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "You'll stay here a little longer with Grandma, okay?" They nodded, seemingly satisfied, and scampered off to play. My mom, however, wasn't so easily appeased. "She's still at the house?" she asked, her sharp gaze pinning me. I nodded. "For now. But I've started the process. I talked to a lawyer yesterday." Her face softened with a mix of sadness and support. "I'm sorry it's come to this, Mark, but you're doing the right thing. The kids deserve stability, and you don't need to be dragged down by her choices." Leaving my mom's house, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I had a meeting with the lawyer later that afternoon to finalize the paperwork. As I drove, my phone buzzed relentlessly on the seat beside me, Beth. I ignored it, but her persistence was relentless. When I finally pulled over to check the messages, her voice filled the voicemail inbox. "Mark, I know you're angry, but we can work through this. Don't throw away our family over one mistake. The kids need us both. I need you. Please call me back." Another voicemail followed. Her tone was more defensive this time. "I don't understand how you can be so cold. I told you it was just one night, Mark. How can you let that destroy everything? You're overreacting." I deleted them all without responding. At the lawyer's office, the reality of my decision hit me like a punch to the gut. The paperwork felt heavy in my hands, each page a testament to the life I was unraveling. "This will take time," the lawyer said, her tone brisk but not unkind. "Infidelity is strong grounds in this state, but custody can be tricky. The courts favor joint custody unless we can prove she's unfit." "You mentioned the children weren't present during the incident." "No," I said firmly. "They were with my mother." She nodded, jotting down notes. "Good. That works in your favor. But be prepared, this won't be easy." Back at the house that evening, I found Beth waiting for me in the kitchen. She had made dinner, the table set neatly, her effort at reconciliation painfully obvious. "I thought we could talk," she said, her voice soft, almost pleading. I stood in the doorway, unsure whether to sit or turn and leave. "I don't know if there's anything left to say." She approached me slowly, her hands clasped in front of her. "Mark, I know I hurt you. I know I messed up. But can't we fix this? For the kids? For us?" I shook my head. "Beth, this wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice. You chose to betray me, to betray everything we built. I don't think I can come back from that." Her eyes welled with tears, and for a moment, I almost felt pity for her. But then her voice hardened, her tears replaced with frustration. "You're being so self-righteous," she said, her tone biting. "Do you really think anyone else would be as good to you as I've been? You're no saint, Mark. Don't pretend this is all on me." The words stung, but they only cemented my resolve. This isn't about being a saint, Beth. This is about respect, trust, and fidelity. You broke that. And now we're broken. I left her standing there, the smell of dinner wafting through the air, untouched. The next morning, I started moving my things out. Beth hovered nearby, alternately watching in silence and throwing out desperate attempts to convince me to stay. But it was too late. When I picked up the kids from my mom's house, their cheerful chatter was a bittersweet reminder of what I was fighting for. "Where's Mom?" Emma asked as I buckled her into her car seat. "She's at home, sweetheart," I said gently. "We'll see her soon." For now, I focused on them, their laughter filling the car as I drove toward an uncertain future. The days that followed felt like a series of small battles, each one carving deeper rifts between Beth and me. I moved into a small apartment on the edge of town, the kind of place I could never imagine calling home, but it was enough for now, a temporary refuge. I'd filed the divorce papers, and the wheels of the legal process were grinding forward, slow and painful. Beth, however, wasn't ready to let go. Every day brought new messages, oscillating between pleas for forgiveness and sharp accusations. Some mornings, I'd wake to find my phone flooded with texts. "Mark, please, can we just talk? For the kid's sake, if nothing else." Followed by, "How could you do this to us? To our family? You're the one tearing us apart." One evening, I picked up the kids from my mom's house and took them to the park. Watching them laugh and play tugged at something deep inside me, a reminder of what I was fighting for. Natalie, ever the observant one, sat beside me on the bench after a while. "Dad," she began hesitantly, "are you and Mom mad at each other?" I swallowed hard, struggling to find the right words. "We're having a hard time right now," I admitted. "But we both love you, and that will never change." She nodded, her 9-year-old mind processing the situation with a seriousness that broke my heart. "Emma says Mom cried on the phone with Grandma," she said quietly. "Did you make her cry?" Her words hit me like a blow, but I kept my voice calm. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, sweetheart. And sometimes those mistakes hurt people. But it's not your fault, okay? None of this is your fault." She nodded again, though her brow remained furrowed, and ran back to join her siblings. Back at the apartment later that evening, I tucked the kids into their makeshift beds and sat down with a whiskey, staring at the divorce papers on the table. It all felt so surreal. This wasn't the life I had planned, the life I had worked so hard to build. My phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at the screen. "Beth." I debated ignoring it, but something in me caved. I picked up. "Mark," she said, her voice small and shaky, "thank you for answering. I needed to hear your voice." "What do you want, Beth?" I asked, my tone tired but not unkind. "I want my family back," she said, her voice cracking. "I want you back." I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes. "It's not that simple." "It could be," she pressed. "We could fix this, Mark. I'll do whatever it takes. Counseling, therapy, anything. Just, please don't let this be the end of us." For a moment, her desperation stirred something in me. But then I remembered her choices, the lies, the betrayal. "I can't trust you, Beth," I said finally. "And without trust, there's nothing to rebuild." Her sobs on the other end of the line were heartbreaking, but I didn't let them sway me. "Good night, Beth," I said softly before hanging up. The next morning, I met with the lawyer again to discuss custody. Mississippi law favored joint custody, but my lawyer believed we had a strong case to argue for primary custody, given Beth's infidelity and the instability it brought into the home. Beth, on the other hand, wasn't going down without a fight. I returned home that evening to find her sitting on the steps outside my apartment, her arms wrapped tightly around herself against the chill. She looked up as I approached, her face pale and drawn. "What are you doing here, Beth?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "I need to talk to you," she said, standing. "I can't lose my kids, Mark. Please, don't do this to me." "I'm not doing this to you, Beth," I said firmly. "You did this to yourself." She stepped closer, her eyes pleading. "I know I messed up. But don't take them away from me. I'm a good mother." "You are," I agreed. "But this isn't just about being a good mother, Beth. It's about being someone they can look up to, someone they can trust. How can I believe you won't hurt them the way you hurt me?" Tears spilled down her cheeks as she shook her head. "I would never hurt them, Mark. I swear." Her pain was raw, and for a moment, I felt my resolve waver. But I knew that letting her back into my life, into our children's lives without consequences, would only set us up for more heartache. I'll always make sure they know you love them, I said quietly. But this is how it has to be. Beth crumpled, her sobs echoing in the cold night air as I turned and walked inside, closing the door on what we had once been. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. Every decision I made felt like a step further into uncharted territory, and the weight of it threatened to crush me. But as the first light of dawn filtered through the curtains, I resolved to keep moving forward, for the kids, for myself. Some wounds never heal, but with time, they scar over, leaving reminders of the battles fought and survived. Weeks turned into months, and the dust began to settle, though the aftermath of Beth's betrayal lingered like a bruise, tender and persistent. The divorce proceedings moved forward, slow and deliberate. I poured my energy into work, the kids, and piecing together a version of my life that felt like my own again. The kids had adjusted better than I expected. They stayed with me during the week and spent weekends with Beth. It wasn't ideal, but I was grateful to have them close. Their laughter filled my apartment, a beacon of light in an otherwise dark chapter. Beth, on the other hand, was struggling. She made every effort to put on a brave face, but I could see the cracks. The woman who once carried herself with confidence now seemed unsure, unsteady, as if the consequences of her actions had finally caught up with her. One evening, I was sorting through some old photos, trying to decide what to keep and what to let go of. Among the pictures was one of Beth and me on our wedding day. Her smile was radiant, her eyes full of hope. I stared at the image for a long time, the memories it stirred bittersweet. The sound of my phone vibrating on the table broke my reverie. It was a text from Beth. "Beth, can we talk? Please." I sighed, setting the photo aside. For months, she had been trying to mend things, apologies, promises, even offers of therapy. But I couldn't go back, not after everything. Still, a part of me felt compelled to respond. "Me, what's on your mind?" The reply came almost instantly. "Beth, can we meet? Just for coffee. I won't take much of your time." The next day, I met her at a small cafe near the park. She looked tired, her once perfectly styled hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, her makeup minimal. She seemed, smaller somehow, as if the weight of her choices had physically diminished her. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice soft. I nodded, waiting for her to speak. "I wanted to apologize again," she began, her hands fidgeting with her coffee cup. "I know I've said it before, but I don't think I've ever really explained." "Beth," I interrupted gently, "we've gone over this. I understand why you did it, but that doesn't make it okay. It doesn't change what happened." She looked down, her shoulders slumping. "I know. But I need you to know, it wasn't about you. You've always been a good husband, a good father. This was my failure, not yours." Her words hung in the air, heavy and sincere. For the first time, I saw a glimmer of the woman I had fallen in love with, the one who could admit her mistakes, who wasn't afraid to own her flaws. "I appreciate that," I said finally. "I really do. But we're not the same people we were when we got married, Beth. Too much has happened. I think we both need to move on." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she nodded. "I'm trying," she said. "For the kids. For myself. I just wish I hadn't hurt you the way I did." After the meeting, I felt a strange sense of closure. I knew things between us could never go back to the way they were, but her apology felt genuine, and for the first time, I believed she was beginning to understand the magnitude of her actions. I focused on the future. My lawyer informed me that the custody arrangement would likely remain as it was, with me having primary custody during the week. The court had acknowledged Beth's infidelity but didn't deem it a reason to deny her time with the kids. Still, I was content. My children were happy, and I was learning to rebuild my life, one step at a time. Months later, as I stood on the sidelines of Natalie's soccer game, I caught Beth's eye across the field. She waved, a tentative smile on her face. I waved back, feeling no bitterness, only a quiet acceptance of what had been and what now was. Life was far from perfect, but it was moving forward. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope for the future. It's been a year since that night, the night that shattered the foundation of my marriage. A year since I walked out of the house, feeling like I'd lost everything. But life has a way of surprising you, of offering light in places you thought only darkness could exist. The divorce was finalized 6 months ago. The process was as painful as I'd expected, but there was relief in the finality of it. The kids adapted surprisingly well to our new normal, splitting time between Beth's place and mine. They asked fewer questions as the months went on, seemingly content to see both of their parents trying their best. Beth and I reached an understanding. While we would never regain what we once had, we maintained a civil relationship for the sake of the kids. There were moments of awkwardness, birthday parties, parent-teacher conferences, but we navigated them with care. I even started to feel something I thought I never would again when it came to Beth, forgiveness. Not because what she did was excusable, but because holding on to the anger was only poisoning me. One afternoon, I was at the park with the kids when Natalie ran up to me, her face glowing with excitement. "Dad! Come meet my new friend's mom," she said, tugging at my hand. I followed her to a bench where a woman sat, watching the children play. She looked up as I approached, her warm smile instantly disarming. "I hope she wasn't bothering you," I said with a chuckle, nodding at Natalie. "Not at all," the woman replied, extending her hand. "I'm Claire." "Mark," I said, shaking her hand. We fell into easy conversation, talking about the kids, work, and life. There was a kindness in her eyes, a genuine warmth that I hadn't felt in a long time. Over the following weeks, we saw each other more often, at the park, school events, even a casual coffee date. Claire was a widow, raising her son alone, and there was an unspoken understanding between us, a shared recognition of loss and resilience. For the first time since the divorce, I felt a spark of something new. It hasn't been easy, rebuilding a life after such a profound betrayal. There are scars that will never fully heal and memories that resurface at the most unexpected times. But I've learned to live with them, to let them remind me of how far I've come. Beth has also changed in her own way. She's more present with the kids, more attentive and thoughtful. I think she's finally made peace with the choices she made and the life that came after. As for me, I've learned that endings aren't always final. Sometimes, they're just the beginning of a new story, one that's stronger, wiser, and more hopeful than the one before. The end. Thank you for watching to the end. Write in the comments what you liked and what you would like to see next.